The year is 2014. I'm in 6th grade, and I decided to take my greasy self to GameStop to spend my mom's hard-earned money on a PS4. It was the greatest day of my life. Right behind the day I bought a PS3. It's funny how life works in chapters that way. However, I didn't spend $400 on a rectangle just to stare at it. That's saved for the family brick in our living room. Rather, I opted to buy a game with the system. And not just a game, a PS4 bundle with a game. And that game being the one, the only, Destiny. Now, for all of you that aren't familiar with this beautiful piece of trash, let's give a little breakdown in the best and only way I know how. Destiny's style has been described as a first-person shooter that incorporates role-playing and MMO elements, but Bungie has avoided describing Destiny as a traditional MMO game. Instead, many of the characteristics of traditional MMO games follow the prosperous period of exploration where peace is a traditional MMO game, the solution of these colonies, an event known as the Golden Age, collapse, mankind teetering. Okay, Jesus, that's enough Wikipedia. Essentially, it's a first-person shooter that has 3 classes: Hunter, Warlock, and Jock. When you first boot up the game, you pick a class, create your character, and get introduced to a long cutscene with tons of exposition. That's essentially saying, you're a part of the light, you gotta take out the dark. Real creative, I know. The game centers around you, constantly getting better loot to do cooler missions and make your guy look even more pretty. Your strength and sense of progression is tracked through levels, which is essentially a way to just get points used on a skill tree that'll get you skills that everyone ends up having in the end anyway. This is where things get fun. As every piece of equipment has a light level. Your boots, your chest, your guns, your underwear, your Gucci lingerie, everything has a light level, and the cumulative number of all of these pieces of armor adds up to your character light level. And this basically indicates if your new best friends are going to kick you out of the fire team for being too weak to do the raid. Guys, come on, I told you I grinded for hours. Can't you just carry just a little bit for me? I need this new loot. As Wikipedia so elegantly said, this game is completely online, so grab a snack, play with your friends, or play countless hours of PvE and turn up the volume to block out the sound of your own tears. There is a story mode, which, don't worry, we'll talk about that later. A PvP mode, which has your game modes such as Team Deathmatch, Solo Deathmatch. Cooking Mama? I don't remember that being in the game. There is PvE, which took the form of raids and nightfalls, where you take on waves and waves of enemies with a hint of story content for a chance at getting some precious, precious loot.
I got the Gjallahorn! I got the Gjallahorn! Yes! Yes!
Maybe I can do that well of a job at giving this game a synopsis or making it sound interesting, but trust me, when this game was coming out, the hype was as contagious as smallpox. Everyone was excited for this game, as not only was it a big headliner for the PS4, but also the first IP from Bungie in over 10 years. In fact, it was incredibly successful at launch, selling over $500 million worth of copies to retailers, with the amount of players increasing from 9.5 million in 2014 to 25 million in 2015. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal now, Mom. So it was pretty successful commercially, meaning obviously everybody loved it. Right? Well... People like this game about as much as someone chewing with their mouth open. Despite the amount of cash money this game made, it got hit hard critically. It didn't take long for people to find a lot of flaws with this game, and it could be one of the original money-milking games. I like to give this title to games that have been released in poor condition in order to get some money, force players to spend more money on the game, or in Destiny's case, both. The game lacks pretty much any story. It was a lazy excuse for what people were expecting to be a space epic. The gameplay was fun, but the story missions can be summed up by, go here, shoot this, stand here, shoot more, go here, you're done. Every mission was essentially the same, except for whatever dumb planet you were on. And just a funny little side note, this game is a game in space. Am I wrong? So one would expect some space romps to occur, but we didn't get that. Even though in the game's story there's apparently hundreds of planets humans have inhabited, we're stuck on Mars, the Moon, Earth, and Venus. That's probably the 4 lamest planets in the galaxy. And those super cool ships that were advertised where you can fly around and have space battles and you were probably expecting to be able to go inside and have fights in, yeah, those are just used for loading screens, which is super cool when you've been grinding for hours with your friends doing raids and nightfall strikes and you end up getting a ship instead of some loot, which is just so cool because you can't do anything with them. Not to mention that this game got really repetitive really quick. The PvE sections weren't very different from the story, again just having players plow through waves of enemies over and over and over and grinding for way too long on basically desolate planets that are as good as open fields. And besides all of this, the voice acting sucked.
The eye is charged. It's time to enter the Black Garden and finish this.
I thought this guy was an actor. Where can I sign up? But fear not, for every mistake, there was at least 2 expansion packs that came out, which ended up costing my mom a lot of money, but we'll talk about that later. So maybe this game wasn't perfect, but notice how the title of this video isn't I hate Destiny so much that I want to break my own hand so I don't have to play it anymore. It's actually I miss Destiny. See if you can read it here. I miss Destiny. Believe it or not, my friends love this game. Despite the grind, the reused enemies, the emptiness, the butt ugly UI. Jesus, get that thing away from me. My middle school group and I played this game like it was our job and the economy was having a meltdown. So obviously we were excited for the second installment. Or so we thought. Now awkward freshman in high school, the squad and I played this game a ton, basically thinking it was just an improved version of the original. I honestly spent hundreds of hours on this game and the previous, just grinding out Crucible matches and trying to get loot to make my guy look like the coolest hunter in the galaxy. Jesus, I did not have a lot of schoolwork, I guess. However, we quickly saw the flaws of this game and acknowledged the repetition that was also previous in the first installment. But before we really talk about the cons of this franchise, let's delve into Destiny 2. Destiny 2 released on September 6, 2017, and boy oh boy, was it a game. Honestly, this game was better than the original. It had a better story, but honestly that's not saying too much because Jack and Jill was a better story than Destiny 1. It had less randomized loot, less grinding, more interactive and interesting cooperative gameplay, more enemies. Everything about it was just bigger and better. So all was well, and we all lived happily ever after.
When your heart is in your dream.
If only it were that easy. You see, Destiny 2 had its own slew of problems that people did not appreciate. They became so noticeable in fact that Destiny 2 has been free to play since 2019. So that begs the question, how did this giant of a franchise, a game that was supposed to be the next generation's World of Warcraft, turn into a shell of its former self? Well, I guess there's no more putting it off. Let's discuss what went wrong with Destiny. Just to reiterate, these games are not necessarily terrible. In fact, I'd say they're objectively good games, but what makes them so disappointing for me and tons of other fans is how it just did not live up to the hype at all. Destiny had some of the greatest marketing ever, using their $500 million budget to make crazy live-action commercials that made you feel like a space wizard. These games were supposed to be a revolution, an online giant that would be updated for at least a decade, as Bungie signed a 10-year contract with Activision in order to get the game made. Think of it, the creators of Halo haven't made an IP in 10 years, and now their newest game is supposed to be an online space adventure that promises space battles, guns, interesting missions, and dance emotes? So it makes sense why this game was hyped to the moon and back, but that's what makes it so sad to revisit today. The problem that became so obvious was just how little Bungie actually cared about the game. Call it complications with Activision because I don't see how such a passionate company can become so money hungry, but the fact of the matter is that this game was just lazy. From the repetitive gameplay and basically non-existent story in the first game to the reused assets in the second, these games were a depressing blend of great ideas and lazy execution. Not to mention the characters that we were supposed to care about for no other reason than the fact that they're existing. The Traveler, Ikor Ray, the Titan Headmaster that I forgot the name of, and even Xur are all basically the same character with the same stoic nature, which is just a fancy way of saying they're just super bland. The only memorable character was Cade 6, which is basically just a Deadpool ripoff because MCU comedy was invading every single piece of media in 2014. And he ended up dying in the second game, so the only likable character was just gone. And not to mention the fact that the story, a piece of the game that Bungie was advertising as a grand exploration with deep lore, was only accessible via a website. Now let me ask, why would I want to scramble off my PS4 to a website to learn more about a game that I was just playing, especially when that game has done nothing to make it seem interesting enough for me to want to look it up? This pathetic story led many to ask, why wasn't it just in the game? Which was actually a question on my protest sign in the Great Bungie riots of 2017. This question is answered in the form of the expansion packs, which... oh god, the expansion packs. When Destiny released, fans were quick to notice how fun the game felt in their gamer hands, but how empty everything else was. Fans were wondering how a game that seemed to have so much care put into it, takes so long to make, ended up being a desert of content. The answer was, like everything else in our corrupt capitalist society, money. Money is the name of the game when it comes to Destiny. It seemed like a cow for Bungie, based on how much they were able to milk out every single piece of content from those udders. Now, fans weren't expecting the entire experience right at launch, as Destiny was advertised as a game that would be updated continuously for over a decade. Here's a word from our sponsor and director of production at Destiny, John T. Barnes.
We're going to continuously update the game from now until the end of time. That's always going to be a part of the philosophy of Destiny. We always want to build a new universe, but keep building upon it, rather than to do a complete and utter restart periodically.
So yeah, we weren't expecting the entire experience, but we were expecting maybe a complete game. I truly cannot express how empty this game was before the third expansion, The Taken King. Again, there was virtually no story and terrible writing. Must I look at Peter Dinklage again, who literally got replaced for being so bad. There was very little endgame content when the game first launched, with not even the raid for players that hit max light, which was very easy to do. As stated before, every mission felt the same because it was just you standing at a point and having waves of enemies rush at you, which also made enemies feel the same because they all did the same thing, except this one looks like Baymax. The perks for a lot of equipment were locked behind hours and hours of grinding, which is the only way to describe the gameplay.
Grinding.
Collectibles you found in the overworld were virtually useless and had no impact, and the overworlds themselves were so barren. And if all of this wasn't enough, there was a glitch with purple engrams. Side note, engrams are the way that you get equipment. They're little beams of light that drop from enemies when you kill them that come in yellow, purple, blue, green, and gray, and the rarity is in that order. Where it gave out blue and green items instead of purple. And it reminded me so. I know I'm getting repetitive by critiquing this game, but I just had to set the groundwork for saying that this game needed help. So expansion packs were quickly released to help this game on life support. The first expansion pack, The Dark Below, was okay and released only a couple months after the game did on December 9, 2014. It finally added some endgame content for those who reached max light, which, again, very easy to do. But besides that, it didn't really add too much and focused on a species in the game that was already present, so it kinda just did the bare minimum. However, this DLC showed the potential for Destiny's cooperative gameplay, as it finally exposed us to The Raid, something we could cry about with our friends. Oh my god, Jared, no. I'm standing on the glowing pillar, while you use your Gjallahorn taking on the force field, Terrence is going to carry the black hole up to the moon, and Xavier over here will help control the waves of enemy. Despite retreading old ground on the moon, at the very least there was something to do, which for a $60 game, you would expect to be included in the experience. The second expansion, The House of Wolves, released May 19th, 2015 to much more positive reviews. Added new social space, new equipment, a light story, new multiplayer modes in the forms of the Prison of Elders and Trials of Osiris, and I cannot tell you the pressure I felt in Trials of Osiris that was so competitive. I feel like MJ with 10 seconds left on the clock in Game 6, oh my god, for the championship. However, people were still upset that this expansion didn't add anything too different. It reused a lot of old assets, and things were getting stale. Eventually, The Taken King released on December 15th, 2015 to critical acclaim, and my friends and I reached our final forms. This expansion gave us a new story, finally a new place to explore called the Dreadnought, a new raid, new enemies, new weapons. It was advertised as its own game, and this is where the bulk of my gameplay came from my friends and I. A beautiful mix of atmospheric and eerie levels, new enemies, and truly intuitive cooperative gameplay made my friends and I scramble back to this game like Macy's on a Black Friday. Another expansion released in 2016 called The Rise of Iron, but I'm gonna trust the reviews and say that it was fine. Don't get me wrong, I still played this expansion and Destiny 2 a ton, but my prime was just into Taken King, so everything seems fine enough. We're all having a good time, eating pizza rolls, hiding in our closets so our parents don't see us playing at 3 AM. But let's take a deeper look at the expansions and Destiny 2, because this is where things get criminal. Let me break this down. Destiny was $60. Makes sense. But something makes a little less sense when you realize that this game was basically a third of the game upon release. Dark Below was $20 and added a raid, which should have been in the game already, and didn't really do too much new stuff. The House of Wolves also released for $20, which, okay, kinda sucks, but at least had some good content. The Taken King released for $40, and it was advertised as a new game, with a new copy of Destiny even being re-released with the Taken King and other expansions included. Okay, so my wallet's kinda hurting at this point, and I feel like I just invested into the stocks by buying Destiny. But the Taken King was pretty great, and I think I got my money's worth. Then the Rise of Iron released for $30, bringing the grand total for Destiny 1 to $170. I could go to Chuck E. Cheese, spend all that money on tickets, and probably get everything behind the counter for that type of money. It is ludicrous that we have to spend $170 to get a complete experience for a AAA game. And here's the thing, you can argue that, hey, Bungie's just doing their job, they're trying to give us new content, and it's not that bad, so we should just spend our money on it and stop complaining. But to that, I have to say, why did they ever release Destiny so unfinished? I would rather wait another 2 or 3 years and get the entire experience for $60 than being spoon-fed the game over a course of 3 years for $170. So the expansions made people really mad. It was a clear scam just to get people to pay more money. And Bungie played it off as something that they were trying to do to make the greatest experience for the fans. But if they cared about the fans so much, why did they lock previously free content behind a paywall in the form of the DLC? If you don't buy the Taken King, well, that's too bad. You're going to have to find somewhere else to do heroic strikes and nightfall missions. Because unless you sold your soul to Bungie and bought the Taken King, you can't access this one's previously free content. Even PvP was limited, as old modes could only be accessed if you bought the Taken King. Needless to say, these expansions began to lose the meaning of the word. Rather than adding on to a game, they were taking things away from the fans. So not only has Bungie spread out their game over the course of years, requiring at least $120 to get the full experience, as remember, the game was completely empty in its launch state, but now they're punishing fans that don't spend money? This is criminal. Should I call someone? This is literally criminal. And it gets better. Microtransactions were added through an update. The things that Bungie claimed would only add to the experience of the game. How is the game making me spend more money, actively making it a better game and experience for me? The player, the one that matters. I get it. DLC is basically an expectation for AAA games. But DLC is supposed to add on to a game, not be a necessity to get the entire experience. And then there's Destiny 2, which absolutely crushed me. The game launched with, shocker, a pretty lackluster story and little to no endgame content. So I guess Bungie didn't learn their lesson that games should be completed when they're launched. And if that wasn't bad enough, the game was released with expansion packs already announced. That's basically just saying they're taking away content and then reselling it to the fans. Not only this, but shaders, a purely cosmetic item that just made your Guardian look pretty and allowed people to express themselves, were now a one-time use, and you could buy more using real-life money. And it gets worse. When the first expansion was released, it again took away free content from the players unless they bought the DLC, pulling the exact same crime they did in the last game. They're forcing consumers to spend more money on a game they already spent $60 on just to get the full experience. Your Honor, I rest my case. There's also a glitch where the game would give you less XP than it said it's actually giving you, making players want to spend more money on microtransactions in order to get anything done in an adequate amount of time. Along with this, Destiny 2 reused so many old assets that it almost felt like the same exact game in so many cases. You still fought the Cabal, the Vex, the Ants, and the character and UI screens were exactly the same. They're so similar that memories of them just blend together in my head. I just can't tell the difference between the two. And on top of all of this mountain of garbage, the game had so many other aspects that just made it flat out unenjoyable to play. Bad matchmaking, tons of grinding in the endgame, and the game controlling how many story missions you can do at a given time all made it feel like it was trying to be boring. Add expansion packs that were almost $40, and the game was just too boring and too expensive to be invested in. Bungie eventually fixed more of the drastic issues, but only after they were called out, which just proves that they were trying to undersell the audience. Now, Destiny 2 is free to play, with tons of players giving up after investing potentially hundreds of dollars into this franchise for consistently lackluster content that they've probably already seen or played before. This criminal behavior and drive for money is eventually what ended Destiny. It wasn't unoriginality, it wasn't bad gameplay, it was greed, and I cannot express how sad that is. I know I spent a lot of time arguing why this game should get a life sentence, but as I made clear in this video, I don't hate Destiny. In fact, I love this game so much, it's like a Beauty and the Beast situation. I'm Beauty, of course, and Destiny is like the Beast, but instead of turning into the game of my dreams, it just turned into an even uglier beast. I know the atrocities of this game. I know it's a scam. I know Bungie treated its fans like ATM machines with arms and legs. But good God, if I didn't have some of the best gaming experiences of my life with this thing. I have so many fond memories of waking up early on a Saturday morning, trying to complete the raid without crying, staying up past 3 AM just laughing with my friends playing Crucible matches, of meeting new people and creating bonds just because we love this game. and because we both really wanted the Gjallahorn. The beauty of Destiny didn't come from its incredibly fun shooting, addictive gaming cycles, and beautiful customization that made me look at the coolest bounty hunter in the galaxy, but rather from interaction. This was my first true experience with online multiplayer, and the idea of staying connected with my friends, having to use our heads to beat a really difficult space puzzle and complete a really challenging mission, it excites me to this day. It showed me the potential for video games. It showed me the beauty of completing challenges while laughing with my friends the whole time. For me, this game wasn't disappointing until I saw the flaws with it when I was older. I love this game to death, and it shaped how I view video games now. So I can express how disappointing it is. While looking back at this game, I no longer see a perfect image of what I used to love, but rather a hollow mess that was closer to a pyramid scheme than a good game. I will always miss Destiny for the fun it brought me, the friends it helped me make and keep, and some of the best gaming experiences of my life. But I will never forgive it for being the most shallow and money-hungry game I've ever played. I hate Destiny, but I love it too much to forget about. Thank you for watching.